I've covered this material before, but Dennis Morissette, who seems to think that I question his honesty, has dared to contradict my judgment. Here he says, in this comment on the JFK Theorist video, by the way, it's not Decker with Roger Craig in the parking lot, it's Eddie Walthers. And Dennis Morissette may be the only person in the world who calls Buddy Walthers Eddie Walthers, but that's his distinction, I guess. So here we go again. I'm going to try again to explain why it is Decker, not Buddy Walthers with Roger Craig in the railroad yard. And the foundation of this theory is that Deputy Luke Mooney said that Sheriff Decker was in the railroad yard. In this report he made out the day after it happened. I'll read that from the beginning. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just the part that's here. I was standing in front of the sheriff's office at 505 Main Street, Dallas, when President Kennedy and the motorcade passed by. Within a few seconds after he had passed me and the motorcade had turned the corner, I heard a shot, and I immediately started running towards the front of the motorcade, and within seconds heard a second and a third shot. I started running across Houston Street and down across the lawn to the triple underpass and up the terrace to the railroad yards. I searched along with many other officers this area when Sheriff Bill Decker came up and told me and Officers Sam Webster and Billy Joe Victory to surround the Texas School Book Depository building. I don't think there's any ambiguity here. He says Sheriff Bill Decker came up and told him something. So that means that the day after it happened, Deputy Mooney is saying that Sheriff Decker was in the railroad yard. Of course, it's not as simple as that. Mooney did change his story. When the Warren Commission came along, he tells it differently. I never did look at my watch to see how many seconds it took us to run so many 100 yards and into the railroad yard. We were there only a few seconds until we had orders to cover the Texas Depository building. Okay, now he's got orders. Sheriff Bill Decker doesn't come up and tell him. He's got orders. Mr. Joe Ball, how did you get those orders? They were referred to us by the sheriff, Mr. Bill Decker. So now it's sounding like, if you take literally what he says, that Decker was there giving him the orders, because if Decker referred them to him, that means Decker is there giving him the orders. But then Ball asks, where was he when he gave you those orders? This, I think, reveals that Ball knows that Mooney said in his statement that Decker was in the railroad yard. Mr. Ball does not confront Mooney with his statement, because then we would know that Mooney said that. Very few people are going to have read Mooney's statement and realize that Ball is actually changing the story here, putting it on the record differently than it was originally told. And Mooney complies. He said, they were relayed to us. They were relayed on to us. I assume Mr. Decker was up near the intersection of Elm and Houston. Did you hear it over a loudspeaker? No, sir. It come by word by another officer. So now Mooney is made to say that somebody other... Well, actually... Well, no, he has changed his story, because he says he assumes Decker was up at the intersection of Elm and Houston. So I say he's lying here, but he's not lying very convincingly. And this is months later, when his original statement was that Decker was there. So I think that Mooney was telling the truth on November 23rd, when he said Sheriff Bill Decker came up and told him to go to the Texas School Book Depository. And I think someone had prevailed upon him to change his story, and by the time Joe Ball has him, he changes his story to the official story. And speaking of the official story, Sheriff Decker was in Chief Curry's car, and we can see his very distinctive silhouette in this frame from one of the films. And after the shooting, Sheriff Decker got on the radio and ordered his men into the railroad yard. And this is 12:31.
Station 5 to move all men available out of my department back into the railroad yard there in an effort to try to determine if what and when happened down there, and hold everything secure until the homicide and other investigators can get there. 10-4 Dallas 1, Station 5. We'll be notified for 31.
And then Sheriff Decker tells the official story. I then proceeded to Parkland Hospital, where I assisted with the removal of the president onto the hospital carriage. I also was present when the governor was removed from the car. Special Agent in charge Sarles was with me during all this activity. Special Agent Lawson went immediately in the hospital with other Secret Service agents, and they wheeled the president and the governor into the hospital. Mr. Sarles went on to the hospital, and I remained outside and got assistance in getting the street cleared. Sheriff Decker is helping to clear the street at the Parkland Hospital. In a short time, Mr. Sarles came out and got in a police car returning to the city, and a little later on I obtained a ride with 2 homicide officers. I arrived at the vicinity of Elm and Houston Streets and immediately took up the investigation at the Texas School Book Depository. So if what Decker says here is true, that he went to the hospital and fiddled around there for a while before he came back, then that means that Mooney has to be wrong, that Decker didn't come up to him and tell him to go to the Texas School Book Depository. And the 2 homicide officers, Boyd and Sims, of course they confirmed Decker's story, but the stories don't make much sense because Fritz seems to think that he rode back with Boyd and Sims and that Decker wasn't there, and Decker seems to think that he rode back with Boyd and Sims and the Fritz wasn't there. So I think that means that this story is bullshit. And while I haven't been able to find the Earl Goltz article referred to here, it has been reported that the limo and 4 other cars, which probably would include Chief Curry's car, stopped after they had gone under the underpass. And I'll read that. DPD officer Earl Brown, otherwise known as E.V. Brown, on the railway overpass above Stemmons, and this isn't the first overpass, there's another one after that, told Earl Goltz in March 1980 that he saw the limo and 4 other cars stop on the Stemmons on-ramp for at least 30 seconds. Brown later repeated his story for Gary Mack. As I said, I haven't found the original sources here, but I think it's probably true that E.V. Brown said this, and that would mean, if it's true, that the car that Decker was in stopped for at least 30 seconds before it had gone very far from the underpass. And that's enough time for Decker to get out of the car. And while I can't prove it, I think that this photography on the Stemmons Highway, which is about this time and about where E.V. Brown was talking about, I think this photography shows Sheriff Decker talking to city officers here just before he heads back to Dealey Plaza, where Luke Mooney saw him. And then we have this from Officer Clyde Haygood's Warren Commission testimony. He had interviewed some witnesses and given some information to the dispatcher. And starting with Mr. Bellin, there was a response to you. What does it say there? Get his name, address, phone number, and all information you can. That was the dispatcher talking to Officer Haygood. Did you do that? No, I never. What happened? Because I was told to go to the school book depository building. I was instructed by 3 different people to come to the front of the school book depository building and remain there until they were talked to. Now, the second part is a misrepresentation because it doesn't make grammatical sense. He wasn't instructed. What he means to have said here was, I instructed 3 different people to come to the front of the school book depository building and remain there until they were talked to. But the important point, and I shouldn't get sidetracked like that, the important point is that he was told to go to the school book depository building, and he dropped what he was doing. He told these witnesses to go over there instead of taking them there himself. And why would he do that? It was, I think, the only reason I can think of is that a superior officer of some kind told him to drop what he was doing and go to the Texas School Book Depository building. There's no information that any superior officer is there, and while Sheriff Decker is in the sheriff department, he's still a legend in his own time. And if Sheriff Decker told Haygood to go to the Texas School Book Depository building, I think Haygood would do that. So I think even though Haygood does not say who told him, and he's probably been briefed not to say who told him, I think it's clear that somebody important told him to drop what he was doing, and I think that was Sheriff Decker. And we have photography from the Darnell film of Clyde Haygood and somebody who looks exactly like Sheriff Decker walking to the Texas School Book Depository building. So that fits pretty well with my interpretation. And this is what put Dennis Morissette into a tizzy in the first place, was he had watched something where I said that it was Decker in the railroad yard with Roger Craig. And I'm not going to show the footage of the video here, but that's Roger Craig in the foreground, and the person I think is Sheriff Decker in the background, and Roger Craig's positioning here just so happens to hide the face of Sheriff Decker in that film footage. So I say that's Decker. The official story is that that's Buddy Walthers, who dressed exactly like Sheriff Decker, same eyeglasses, same hat, but I think it's Sheriff Decker. And also here from the same film, we have that person that I say is Sheriff Decker telling Sergeant Harkness to go to the Texas School Book Depository building, and Sergeant Harkness doesn't question the order, he just does it. And I think if that was Buddy Walthers, Sergeant Harkness wouldn't give a damn what he said to do, but it's because it's Bill Decker that he does as he is told. And also, Buddy Walthers at this time did not go to the Texas School Book Depository. That's not part of the story, the official story. But here, this person, who I say is Sheriff Decker, is walking towards the Texas School Book Depository building. And we know that Buddy Walthers, after this, is still on Elm Street checking out the grass here for some reason. So there it is. The reason presumably would be that Sheriff Decker was managing the situation somehow in Dealey Plaza, but I don't have any information on that. This is based on the evidence I have shown you here. And so I'll never convince Dennis Morissette, of course, but at least I hope he doesn't think I'm questioning his honesty.